Joining us now, President Trump's top White House economic advisor, Larry Kudlow. Larry, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
In July, just a couple of months ago, President Trump said that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly would remain on the job through 2020. Now he says that Kelly is out as one of the top few White House staffers. What happened?
Well, look, it's been a long 2 years for the chief, General Kelly. He ran Homeland Security and has been running the White House staff. I think, by the way, he's been a very good chief, very orderly processes in the White House. As you know, it's not an easy thing to do. General Kelly is a remarkable patriot. He has given such phenomenal service to this country. Perhaps it is time for a rest. President Trump, at our senior staff Christmas dinner Friday night, had some wonderful complimentary things to say about the chief. I heartily concur. So I suppose it's time to move on.
Well, let me ask you two more quick questions. One, did Kelly resign or was he forced out?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest. I think it was very amicable. All right, that's what I understand. Again, the president's saying good things about the chief. I've been in so many meetings. I mean, just so many meetings in my tenure, a little less than a year now. I think a lot of the gossip is just wrong. I think they did get along. Everybody's going to have disagreements. That's the way life works. But was he fired? I don't think he was fired. I wasn't privy to that final conversation. But the president's had great things to say about him.
What do you think of Nick Ayers?
I think quite a lot of Nick Ayers, actually. I've known him for a while. President, I guess, will let us know tomorrow or sometime early in the week who the next chief is going to be. In terms of Nick Ayers, Mike Pence's chief of staff, I think the world of him.
All right, let's turn to your day job. The stock market's had a terrible week since President Trump and President Xi had dinner in Argentina on Saturday night. The Dow lost 1,100 points, or 4.5%. The S&P 500 is now in the red for 2018. Question, how much of this is because of confusion over just what the U.S. and China have agreed to?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'll grant you that, trade issues, China trade issues, haven't been all buttoned down yet. But look, Chris, the first couple of days after that dinner, I was down there at G20 Argentina. The markets did very well, both in China and the U.S., as a matter of fact. Since then, there have been some issues. The Huawei issue, that's a technology company that was violating Iranian sanctions, and Canada has taken them in, and they'll probably be extradited to the U.S. There have been some different statements here and there. Look, I can just tell you right now, we are on track. China has finally, Wednesday and Thursday, China's Commerce Department issued some very positive, promising statements. Sometimes I think these things get lost, maybe the beautiful funeral of former President Bush, but they said, look, they agree with the timetable, they agree with the deadlines, they expect to be moving immediately to take actions on key commodities, for example, by lowering tariffs and opening up export sales for us, things like energy, agriculture, industry. Something like 35 Chinese agencies and the Supreme Court are now working on new legislation to deal with the IP theft issues and other technology issues.
Larry, the reason...
So when you piece it together, Chris, there's a lot of good things out there, and I think sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle.
Well, here's part of the reason it got lost and why it took till Wednesday or Thursday to people find out about it, because there are big differences between how the president and the White House is describing what was agreed to and what the Chinese are saying was agreed to. And let me put a couple of them up. The U.S. says China agreed to, quote, very substantial purchases of agricultural and other products. The Chinese say nothing specific about how big those purchases will be. President Trump says the Chinese will remove their 40% tariff on U.S. auto imports. The Chinese are ducking that one. And then there's the difference between what you and White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro had to say on Friday about that 90-day deadline for a suspension of tariff increases. Take a look.
The president has indicated if there's good, solid movement and some good action, he might be willing to extend the 90 days. We'll have to see on that.
If they're not resolved in 90 days, is this administration willing to walk away?
It's not a question of walking away. It's a question of moving forward on the strategy.
That contradiction between you and Peter Navarro led to a 500-point drop in the Dow on Friday. Forget the Chinese. The White House can't seem to get its own story straight.
Well, with all respect, I don't think there's much daylight between Peter and I. We are focused right now on this first 90-day increment. Regarding what may happen in the future and presidential considerations, that'll be up to POTUS, of course, working with President Xi. I really think that's an exaggerated point. But, Chris, look, I understand people are looking for these issues. Let me just read very quickly. Here was the Chinese Commerce Department announcement. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. China will immediately implement specific issues that have been agreed upon by agriculture products, energy, and automobiles. Automobile tariffs announcements going to come from the State Council Tariff Commission. As I said earlier, it was also announced that a number of Chinese government agencies and the Supreme Court are looking at new laws to prevent intellectual property theft. These are very strong indications. President Trump himself, I remember he called me early Thursday morning to say, did you see that announcement? Did you see that announcement? And I did, and I think it's very positive. Really, we're making more progress now on more specific issues than ever before. Now, let me just add quickly, trust but verify. That's very important. Ambassador Lighthizer will be looking very carefully in the course of his negotiations. He will evaluate. He will make sure there are enforcement mechanisms and timetable mechanisms. Right. That is terribly important. Nothing in this game is done until it is absolutely verified to our satisfaction. So that's a caveat.
Okay,
I don't want to lose that. However, but having said that, the Chinese own statements are really very positive.
Okay. Well, except that, for instance, the president tweeted 40%. A tariff on auto imports is lifted. The Chinese have not committed to that. And there was a big bump in the road on Saturday night. President Xi and President Trump are sitting there having dinner together. You're at the table with them. And suddenly there's the arrest last Saturday of Meng Wanzhou, the chief financial officer of telecom giant Huawei, as you say, for allegedly violating U.S. sanctions on trade with China. Couple of quick questions. One, did President Trump know about that arrest when he sat down to dinner with President Xi? And if not, what was his reaction afterwards?
He did not know. He did not know, and he had no reaction afterward.
Well, the reports have been that he was livid, and frankly, just as an outsider, if one of the top businessmen in the other person's country was being arrested while I'm making nice at dinner, I'd be livid.
He didn't know, okay? I'll just state that unequivocally. He learned way later, by the way, way later. Look, regarding the Huawei prosecution, let me just say that's a law enforcement action. That's primarily Department of Justice. It is a very important issue because the evidence suggests, at least so far, the alleging suggests that Huawei did break the Iranian sanction through different financial channels. We will see how that plays out. That's a enforcement channel.
Can I just ask you a question about how
we're talking about it?
I just want to ask you one question about how it plays out, if I may, Larry. Republican Senator Marco Rubio said this week after the arrest that Huawei, a telecom giant, is a bad actor. Here is Rubio.
Knowing the history of Huawei and how it served as an instrument of Chinese espionage and influence, it's concerning, but if we have a case to be made, the right thing to do is to charge her, and the right thing to do for Canada is to extradite her.
But now China is warning the U.S. and Canada, where she is being held, that there will be consequences if she continues to be held. And one of the top papers in China, the Global Times, says that her arrest amounts to a declaration of war. Can you guarantee me that as part of this negotiation, the president, the administration, will not let her go?
Chris, I can't guarantee anything. As I say, this is a DOJ, NSC law enforcement issue. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm not an attorney. It's outside my lane. So we will see. Look, the U.S. has laws about these things. The U.S. has a number of laws on the books now that protect a number of points. I mean, not only violations of sanctions, be it Iran or other countries, we have laws about anything that was stolen. We're discussing laws. People can't do business in the U.S. or sell us goods, services, intellectual property that we think was stolen. So that's just being tough and protecting the family jewels, in my judgment, and that's protecting the integrity of U.S. national security policy. Very, very important. How this affects trade, Chris? I can't sit here and be absolutely definitive. All I'll say is it seems to me there's a trade lane that we are discussing where you and I both agree the early returns from China are very positive, and it looks like we will get new actions. And there's a law enforcement lane. They're different. They're different. And I think President Trump and President Xi and lower officials will generate or continue to keep that difference. I might be wrong. I can't predict the future on this thing. But they're different channels, and I think they will be viewed that way for quite some time.
Larry, thank you. Thanks for your time, and we'll watch how the markets do this week.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.